the Houston Texans are the first team we're going to break down here. They've got a lot of offseason hype, big groundswell here to put the Texans up into the top tier of the teams in the AFC. I might be pushing that groundswell. I might be one of those who really believes in the Texans. Where do you stand on Houston here heading into 2024?
Yeah, and sometimes I think that you kind of start judging teams or start buying into hype or otherwise based off the actions that those teams make. You know, when they start making moves like they want to win a championship right now, that's what gets people going. And, you know, the Texans surprised everybody a year ago. This time last year, the Texans were the favorite to have the number 1 and the number 2 overall draft pick, right? They were supposed to be terrible. And the Cardinals were supposed to be terrible. Like everything was supposed to be bad for this team. And instead, CJ Stroud was phenomenal. Will Anderson was phenomenal. Bobby Slowick, DeMeco Ryans, everything came together. And this was a playoff team that actually looked like they could make noise once they got there. And now it's not the way it was, you know, a couple of years ago where the Giants unexpectedly made the playoffs and, you know, they sort of overachieved and it was never really real. Everyone seems fairly convinced this is legit. Like the Texans are just way better than people are further ahead than people expected them to be, including Houston, who aren't just happy, like, let's just consolidate, you know, solidify what we did a year ago. They're like, no, go get Danielle Hunter, one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. Go get Stephon Diggs, even if it's only for 1 year. We'll rework his contract. He can get out of here this year. We just want him around to make the depth at wide receiver, like, disgustingly good. And let's go win a championship right now. Forget a window. Forget, you know, maybe in a couple of years. Let's go knock off the Chiefs right this second and become the next Super Bowl champion. And that's, I think, what's really getting people excited. Like, everybody is starting to believe.
Yeah, it was really an impressive season last year. They won a playoff game, go into Baltimore, lose in the divisional round, and they said, "Hey, we found our QB. We have the valuable rookie contract quarterback, so let's go make some moves. Let's be aggressive." And what I'm intrigued by is we always mentioned our old friend Bobby Slowick as the offensive coordinator. You know, him getting Stroud, working well with Stroud, you know, leading to a Nico Collins breakout. And we both loved Tank Dell, and we saw all the ability that he had last year. Adding in Diggs, that offense is in really good shape. And I'm sure we'll talk about the line in a minute and some of those question marks. But now I'm intrigued by year 2 of DeMeco Ryans, the head coach, right? He's known for hard-nosed defense as defensive coordinator of the San Francisco 49ers. Year 2 with DeMeco Ryans, they've got some star power there. And, you and I have been doing this for a while, Sam. Rewind 4 or 5 years in the early Nick Caserio era when they were trying to transition from Deshaun Watson to whatever the post-Deshaun Watson era was going to be. And they just kept finding some average starters, players, 40 to 53 on their roster. They kept signing those types of players, these depth pieces. And we said, where's the star power, Houston? Like, how are you going to get back on track? And now fast forward a few years later, and this defense has Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter. Derek Stingley Jr. Had a breakout season last year, former first-round pick, and he looks like a star heading into year 3. So both sides of the ball have big-time impact players. They've got a good coaching staff, and then CJ Stroud at the helm, coming off of one of the best rookie seasons of any quarterback in NFL history.
Yeah, and by the way, give them credit as well for retaining Bobby Slowick in the offseason. I mean, he was getting head coaching offers, getting head coaching interviews. I think he easily could have departed and taken a head coaching job if he'd wanted one. The Texans apparently gave him, a pay bump to stay in Houston. Like that would have been a variable that undermines all of this, right? Bobby Slowick, CJ Stroud, the system, like who owns the biggest piece of the credit pie? The point being, Bobby definitely has a piece of that. And if that piece had departed and gone to wherever, Seattle or whatever other coaching job was potentially out there, Washington, now they've got to put in an unknown, at offensive coordinator. They've got to try and retain the same level of production and success with a new guy there. So this is a team that wants to win right now. They paid money to keep the coaching staff intact, even again, if it's only a 1-year thing. And they go back into the season with that duo intact. Bobby Slowick at offensive coordinator and CJ Stroud as the quarterback.
Let's dive into some of those pieces that they have, because I say this a lot, like you said earlier, last year at this time, it didn't look like CJ Stroud had the best group of playmakers to throw to. Again, we were high on Tank Dell, didn't know if he was going to hit the ground running as quickly as he did, but he did. Nico Collins, an absolute breakout season. Now he's getting paid over $24 million a year because of it. And look, if they didn't make the Stephon Diggs move, it's still a good group of playmakers. You'd say, hey, they created offense easily last year with Stroud. And then they add Diggs to the mix. And look, was there dissension among the ranks in Buffalo? Were there off-field issues? Was he a disgruntled receiver? I don't know. I'm not even going to try to analyze that piece of it. I just know Diggs can win one-on-one, add an absolute force, type of weapon to this offense, have a Dalton Schultz at tight end, who always seems to be surrounded by good wide receivers, good options top to bottom as far as pass catchers go. And then the other underrated addition, Joe Mixon at running back. They struggled to run the ball at times last year, which is, when you start to add those things up, really impressive for Stroud, that they really didn't have a consistent running game for a rookie. They have some question marks up front on the offensive line. He didn't have an established receiving core. He helped develop Nico Collins. He helped make Noah Brown look like the former 5-star, recruit that he was about 10 years ago. So it's almost like more ammo for, wow, Stroud looks like a star. But I just love what Houston's done to now say, let's not take any chances. Let's add all these pieces around around Stroud to just continue to grow.
Yeah, they've taken a strength and tried to make it even stronger. And yeah, look, Stephon Diggs at this point in his career, he feels even independent of his age, and he might have already started declining, and that's part of why Buffalo was potentially willing to let him go. But even outside of that, like, Stephon Diggs on a team seems to have a shelf life, right? Like, he's agitated his way out now of multiple teams. But from a Texans perspective, it's a one-year deal, and the chances of that going south within one calendar year for a team that expects to be a contender are fairly slim, right? Like, he may get upset in a game here or there, but like, if they're winning games, if he's getting production, if everything looks like it's going on track, it's not going to blow up until it's too late anyway. So it's a move with very little downside from Houston's point of view. And now you have this theoretical group of Nico Collins, who was a superstar, Tank Dell, who was great until his injury, Diggs, and then the tight ends, Dalton Schultz, as you said, Joe Mixon in the backfield. This is a really, really good-looking group that can make plays like all across the board. Like, Stroud has so much to work with.
Like Bobby's former boss, Kyle Shanahan, former coworker, Mike McDaniel, good offense, good results. On paper, questionable offensive line, right? We have Laramie Tunsil at left tackle, one of the best pass protectors in the NFL. Shaq Mason has been an incredibly dependable player since being drafted in 2015. He's back. Some question marks at left guard, former first-rounder Kenyon Green, trying to get his career on track. They had turnover at center last year, moving parts there, and they still made do. So even right tackle, Titus Howard, right? He's never really had an extended period of time where he's played all that well at right tackle as a former first-rounder, even though they've paid him and brought him back. So on paper, to us, using PFF grades, production grades, they don't look great, but they made it work last year. And as I said, Bobby and all of his former coworkers seem to make it work. So is this even a concern heading into the year?
Yeah, it's always hard to know. I mean, they are still investing in the offensive line. Blake Fisher, a rookie, they're still trying to reinforce there. I think that they understand the line maybe isn't as good as it appeared based off how little it impacted them last season. I think that they know that that's not the best group in the world, but I do think that there's now this conscious awareness of people within that Shanahan offensive scheme, whether it's Miami, Houston, San Francisco, that they don't need to invest hugely in the offensive line. It doesn't need to be great. Would it be better if they had Detroit's offensive line, within this system? Sure. Do they need to go and get Detroit's offensive line? Like, do they need to make the kind of expenditure and investment in the group to get there? No. And I think they know that, which is why the kind of moves that they're making are, Blake Fisher, rather than let's prioritize a high-end, big money or first-round guy to come in and try and overhaul this group. Like, they are going to tinker around the edges and hope that the creep back toward average offensive line is achievable and easier because the system is going to allow it to do that.
I mentioned a lot of the star power on defense. I almost went full Massachusetts there. Star power on defense.
Nice.
I mentioned that earlier, but I want to jump right into best case scenario for the Texans because I am intrigued by their defense. And as we've spent a lot of time talking about the offense because they were one of the stories of the NFL season last year, but the 1-2 punch of Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter. Will Anderson had one of the better rookie seasons for an edge rusher, over the last 10, 15 years. Hunter has been an excellent pass rusher. He was a one-man show last year for Minnesota. Just having that duo up front rushing the passer. I mentioned Stingley on the back end. I like what they have on this roster. Jimmy Ward on the back end, who had a lot of success, has had a lot of success with DeMeco Ryans. A lot of good pieces here on this side of the ball as well. I think best case scenario for the Texans is that Super Bowl run. I think they have what they need to at least be discussed in that echelon of Chiefs, Ravens, Bills, Bengals, whoever you want to put in the top of the AFC. I think at least by the end of the season, Houston's being mentioned in that conversation.
Yeah, there's a couple of divisions in the AFC where you're like, three of the teams in this division could win a Super Bowl. I don't think the South is in the same category, but I do think that the Texans have that within their range of outcomes. Like, I buy what they've done. I think that what they believe is plausible. They could easily go on a run of a couple of games in the postseason. Stroud playing even better year two, or at least having more options year two. The defense has been upgraded. I think the Texans are genuine championship contenders.
Worst case scenario, maybe Stroud regresses.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I are both, we're very level-headed, Sam, right? We're very level-headed with that type of stuff. I'm not saying this is definitely going to happen. I was most impressed by Stroud and his just pure pocket mechanics last year. When you're evaluating prospects, a lot of times you talk about the tools and the traits, and Anthony Richardson has a cannon for an arm and he can run. And I feel like with Stroud, maybe we just didn't weigh enough the fact that the guy is balanced in the pocket, maneuvers the pocket, works from read to read, and he just, stuck to being a fundamentally sound quarterback who's accurate at the intermediate and deep levels. And all that did him well. But he also complemented it with the special stuff outside the pocket, the natural feel, handling pressure, things that were a question last year going into the draft, coming out of Ohio State. If that piece of his game regresses a little bit, if he isn't as special outside the pocket and creating outside of structure, could he regress a little bit? I think that's also, just something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody thinks this will happen, but it would be crazy not to at least acknowledge the possibility that Stroud does not have the same caliber of sophomore season as he had as a rookie. We see that all the time. It happens relatively regularly. And if you think about every player coming into the NFL as having this like bell curve range of outcomes, right? Stroud hit something like his 95th percentile of range of outcomes. Like his 95th percentile of all the possible outcomes of Stroud was what we got last season. It was basically as good as you could possibly imagine him being at the next level. I mean, again, like the most logical place for that to go is actually downwards. It's the other way. It's like, well, if that was the 95th percentile, what happens if that was the high water mark? In year two, we're going to get the 85th percentile. Or again, don't think it'll happen, but you would be crazy to sort of say there is zero chance that Stroud plays any worse in year two than he did in year one. It's absolutely a possibility, and that probably has to be in there in terms of the Texans having, like, what their worst case scenario is Stroud does not go forward or doesn't even maintain where he was a year ago, but it was, ends up being a little bit worse than that.
Key position group or player on either side of the ball, I think, for me, it's still kind of that offensive line. It's bringing up the data not matching the way that offense is so good at creating angles in the run game and using play action pass and just protecting the offensive line. But the goal here is to, be championship caliber. And when you get to that level, when you're trying to beat the Chiefs, you're trying to beat Baltimore again, will that come back to bite? So the O-line, outside of Laramie Tunsil, I think, and Shaq Mason, 3/5 of it, there are some question marks there. So that's the key position group for me.
I've brought up the offensive line for the other two Shanahan offenses, so I'm not going to do it this time. No, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it this time. Number one, because I've already done it twice,
and you've done it for you.
And number two, because this is the one of the three that I'm least concerned by. Like, I think this one is okay. It's not great, but it's fine. And if it maintains being fine, I think it's good, more than good enough. The area that I would be looking at is that second cornerback spot. Derek Stingley, I think, is going to be phenomenal. Then they brought in, Kamari Lassiter, the rookie out of Georgia. He looks very good, but is a rookie. And then the other guys are like former first-round reclamation projects, right? Jeffrey Okudah, C.J. Henderson, guys like that. So are they going to have a high-level cornerback 2 opposite Derek Stingley, or will that become a problem as the season goes on? And whereas Stingley might be locking down his guy, part of the reason the Jets defense is so good is because they've got DJ Reed on the other side from Sauce Gardner. Are they going to have their version of DJ Reed, or are they going to have a dynamic where CB2 just gets picked on?